Hello, boys and girls, and welcome back for another math lesson with Miss Kim and also Miss Rosales. Thank you for joining us. So Miss Rosales is again going to play as a role of a student. And so we're going to do another What Do You Notice? Okay. Now, we're going to look at the picture, and when we look at the picture, I want us to think to ourselves, what do we notice? Okay, if you notice one thing, put one thumb on your chest. If you notice two things, put two fingers on your chest. Maybe you notice 10 things, so put 10 fingers on your head. Okay, and also I want you to challenge yourself. I don't want you to just notice just one thing. I want you to try to notice as many ways as you can. So challenge yourself. Maybe today, if you've been only noticing one thing, try to challenge yourself and try to notice three things, okay? All right, so let's look at the picture. Okay, so I'll give you some time to see what you notice. You can press pause. Okay, Miss Rosales notices two things, three things, four things. Oh, wow, five things. Okay. I'm glad you're challenging yourself today, Miss Rosales. All right. Miss Rosales, can you share what is something that you immediately noticed when you saw this picture?
I did a quick count in my head of how many avocados. Sorry, I wanted to sneeze. Half avocados there were, because they're not whole avocados.
Okay, so when you say half, so I hear you mentioning two things, half and whole. So when
Yes.
you say half, what do you mean by half?
Um, we're looking at two parts, equal parts of a
Two
whole.
equal parts of a whole. Okay.
So when I looked at it, the avocado is in this shape, and then it gets cut down the middle, and we have two parts.
Okay, so half is when you have a whole and then you split, or you can split this way, you can split that way, horizontal, vertical, as long as both parts are equal. They have the same amount. So I'm going to put equal as same amount. So we know, oops, not same amount, same amount. Okay, and what do you mean by whole?
I'm referring to two things. It could be a whole item, in this case, an avocado, or it could be a whole group.
Okay. So it means that it hasn't been broken into parts. So whole it has not been broken into parts. Is that, or do you have a better definition?
No, that's a good definition because it helps us understand this picture right now.
Okay, so in this picture, we're looking at avocados. And keep in mind, when you go to the market and buy an avocado, it does not look like this. So so this person bought the avocados and they broke these avocados into equal parts. So let's look at one avocado. So how many equal parts did they, I guess, they didn't, so they did break into half. Can you explain looking at the picture?
So, yes, so I'm looking at the two and then making that whole. So I'm just looking at the half. So I'm counting halves. One, two, three, four on the top row.
Okay, so this is one half of an avocado because if you look at avocados like this, they broke it in half. So this is another half and then another half.
Mhm.
And so the first row, there are four halves, right? Okay. And then would you like to explain more?
Um, well, I noticed something different, but I think that if we want to continue counting, we can continue counting by halves.
Okay, let's
Uh,
see how many halves we have. Okay. So we have one, two, three, four halves.
mhm.
And then we're continuing. Five, 6, 7, 8 halves, 9 halves, 10 halves, 11 halves, and
And
12 halves.
mm,
And I noticed that we've been counting by ones, okay? But if we were to do this in a multiplication, how would we count them instead of doing by ones? Okay, Ms. Rosales?
um, I would find the number of rows and then how many in each row. So I would see that there are 3 rows of 4.
Okay, so what Ms. Rosales is saying that we are going to group them by 4. So the first row, there are, 4 halves. So we'll write 4. And the second row, there are 4 halves.
Mhm.
And then the last row, there are 4 halves. So if we were to put in a multiplication problem, it's actually 4 groups of 3, right? And we would write that as 4 times 3, which, let's skip count by 4. There's 4, 8, and 12. Yes?
Actually, it would be 3 groups. You circled 3
Oh,
groups.
sorry, 3 groups of 4. Yes, there's
Like
3 groups of 4. 1 group of 4, 2 groups of 4, and 3 groups of 4. So 3 groups of 4, 12. But we can also say 4 groups of 3 because if you do it vertically, yes, then there's 1 group of 3, 2 groups of 3, 3 groups of 3, and 4 groups of 3. Okay, and how would we write this in a complete sentence to explain this picture? There are
there are 12 halves
halves
of avocados.
of avocados. Did I spell avocados correctly?
I do believe so. If it ends in an O and you pluralize it, it's ES.
Yes, okay, there are 12 halves of avocados. Okay, now we're going to do a more challenging step. So if there are 12 halves of avocados, how many whole avocados do we have exactly?
Hmm. So that would be grouping them by twos.
Mm,
Oh, it would be less than our 12.
okay, how do we know that?
Um, 2 halves make a whole. So then instead of 4 halves, we combine those 2 and those 2, and we get 2 wholes.
So 2 halves, let's actually put that in writing. 2 halves make 1 whole, okay?
And
2 halves make 1 whole. Yes?
I'm sorry, I have to make my correction.
Okay.
Avocados, I misled you. It's not ES, it's just S. Sorry, boys and girls.
Okay, that was my mistake too, but we're always learning. So avocados is actually spelled Avacados when it's pluralized. Okay, thank you for correcting that. Okay, so then we have another two halves that make a whole. Then we have another 2 halves that make a whole. And then we have another 2 halves that make a whole. And there are another 2 halves that make a whole.
Wow.
So we actually, this is a whole. So we have 1 whole, another whole, another whole, another whole, another whole, another whole. So let's count them. 1,
Mm-hmm.
2,
2,
3,
3.
4, 5, 6. So there are 6 whole avocados. Okay. And then we spelled it correctly. You can also skip count by twos or You can say 2, 4, 6. Or how can we write this in a multiplication?
Well, there are 6 groups of 2. So 6 times 2.
6 times 2. Oh, if we're talking about halves.
Oh, that's right. I apologize. Let's try that again. There are 3 groups of 2.
There are 3 groups of 2.
There are
Okay.
3
Yes.
rows,
There are 2 holes,
and then there's
2
2.
holes, 2 holes. Yes. 3 groups of 2 whole avocados. And so that makes 6. Perfect. Okay. Now, before we go, I just want to quickly go over equal parts. And so when we're looking at this half an avocado, we notice that that something's unique. What did this person do, Rosales?
They took apart, or they sliced it into 4 parts.
Yeah,
Some of it is missing. Like someone ate some of it.
yes. So if you look at it, they split it into 4 parts. Okay. So how many parts are missing? 2 parts. So they're missing avocado here, they're missing avocado here. So there, and then if you notice it, when they split it, did they split into equal parts?
Yes.
So there are 4 equal parts, but 2 equal parts are missing. Yes, okay. So we're gonna leave it as that. I want us to, when we're thinking about, so this whole thing that we're doing when we're talking about equal parts, wholes, and halves, what are we actually learning about?
Mm,
Mr. Rosales?
Fractions.
Fractions. And that's what we've been working on this week, boys and girls. So this is fraction. So keep in mind of the terminologies and vocabulary words: whole, halves, equal parts. Okay? All right. We'll see you next time for another What Do You Notice? Thank you, Ms. Rosales, again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Don't
Bye.
forget to subscribe.
Yes. Bye, boys and girls.